Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel and a building site. So you may be familiar with a clean blank staging wall behind me. However, it is not that anymore, and that's because, long story short, we're having a small extension next door. The wall that you usually see behind me is actually a false wall that we boarded up over the top of a big window because I work in my conservatory. That window has had to be taken out and a proper wall built. So we're in the middle of that, and I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get filmed before I need to move location because the builders aren't here at the moment, but they are due back to finish the wall off. So you may see this video in a few different locations dotted around my house. Anyway, the video today is furniture, but it's actually a metal piece of furniture. It's a metal IKEA cabinet. The reason I'm painting metal is because a few videos back I painted a verdigris effect onto a vase, and when I paint small items like that, I always say this technique can be used on bigger pieces of furniture. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my own words to the test today and see if I can translate my small vase verdigris effect, small verdigris effect vase, that's probably the right way of saying it, onto a bigger piece of furniture like this one. So here's a little look at what it's started out like. It's a metal IKEA cabinet, as I explained. It's also got some bird poo on it because it's been stored in my storage unit on a farm and I didn't blanket it over. So the first thing I'm going to do is clean the bird poo off the cabinet. Even though I'm going to be priming this with a specialist primer to make sure my paint sticks to the surface, I still need to clean it. Obviously, I need to clean this because it's visible there's some excrement on the surface. But even if you think your piece is perfectly clean, if you've just picked it up maybe from Facebook Marketplace or a second-hand shop and you think it looks perfectly clean, never skip the cleaning step because you could have things on there that are invisible to the naked eye, like polish or cleaning products, and they could cause issues with your paint sticking to the surface. This is the cleaner that I always use. It's Dixie Belle's White Lightning. It comes in a tub like this and it's granulated, and when you put those granules in water it dissolves and becomes a really strong degreasing, deglossing cleaner. I decant mine into a spray bottle. I used to always put it into a bucket and then dip a cloth in and rub it that way. However, there's a couple of reasons why I don't do it that way anymore. Number one, it's much more cost effective and a little bit goes a long way in a spray bottle. You can also concentrate where you're applying it more. It puts less wet on the surface if you're using a spray bottle, and my hands suffer terribly. I am a bit naughty because I don't wear gloves, and I know I should, but I never do because they do my head in, so I don't. Just drop my cloth. So when I put my hand in a bucket of water with warm water and everything, and I'm doing that all the time because obviously I paint furniture full time, my hands were starting to get a little bit dried out and a bit sore. So for that reason I use my spray bottle, and that way I don't get wet hands. So, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory how to clean furniture, but if I don't include it, people get annoyed. If I do include it, people get annoyed. So I'm just going to include a small clip of me cleaning the bird poo off the metal cabinet. What it is important to mention with Dixie Belle's White Lightning Cleaner is that it does need to be rinsed off the furniture before you apply any paint or primer products. So once it's been cleaned, make sure you rinse it with clean warm water and then let it dry completely. Okay, we're relocated into the kitchen. This is not where I normally film my stuff because the lighting is not great in here. It's kind of dark, but this is a very good camera. So I'm hoping that it will be okay to film for a short while. If you can hear any background noise, it's the builders, they're so loud. So I'll keep my talking here to an absolute minimum. So the next thing I need to do is prime this, because if I put paint straight over metal, it's going to chip and peel off. It's not going to stick to the surface. So if you're painting anything that is very shiny, metal, plastic, glass, laminate, or it could be wood with a very, very high shine lacquer on it, you need a specialist primer. Up until now, Dixie Belle have always sold a couple of different primers, depending on what you need. So there was one for adhesion and there was also one for stain blocking. No more. This is a brand new primer that does both. So if you need adhesion, this is it. If you need stain blocking, this is it. If you need both, this is it. So there is only one problem solver now. It comes in 3 colours, grey, clear and white. I'm going to use the grey today because the coverage of this is really good, and I'm obviously going over bright red, and I'm going to roller it on. I'm just using the roller for speed on this project, but it does apply with the paintbrush equally as well. And the instructions are to apply 2 to 3 coats of this and let it dry for 24 hours before you apply your paint. So this is the first coat going on. As you can see, the coverage is amazing. This is also water-based as well, so the cleanup is super easy. For the smaller nooks and crannies, I just went in with a smaller brush, and it was also quite evident early on that my son wanted this for his bedroom. So if I was going to be painting this for a customer or to sell, I would be painting the inside to match, but because it's for Herbie, I'm not going to bother. This is the second coat going on now. So that has had 2 coats of the new Bond Emboss applied all over it. I'm now going to leave that to dry for 24 hours before I come back and start my painting. That's just going to give chance for the product to dry and start to bond to the surface properly. Also, I have my tea cooking in the background, which is cottage pie, if anybody was interested. Okay, let's skip to 24 hours later. The cottage pie was delicious, by the way. And I am now applying a base of chalk mineral paint in the colour Coffee Bean. So I experimented with 2 different vases. One had a base coat of Coffee Bean. The other had 2 coats of the Patina paint, which I'm going to use at a later stage. Oh, there's Andy. Panic, abort mission. He's gone. I'm also going to speed this up because it was a long process, actually, applying it with a sponge. The reason I'm applying it with a sponge is to create a little bit of texture. As I mentioned, this is Coffee Bean chalk mineral paint. I tried both ways, and I prefer undercoating my patina paint with Coffee Bean. You don't have to undercoat your patina paints with chalk mineral paint, but I just prefer this look. It just adds a real nice richness and depth to the colour. Okay, we changed location again. I'm back in my conservatory, but it looks a little bit different to what it usually does because this is the wall that had to be knocked down and rebuilt, and it obviously isn't finished yet. So I'm back in here. My floor has also changed as well. I used to have a little wooden platform here that I used to do all my filming and staging, and now I'm on tiled floor and it's very cold on my bum, so I may not stay on the floor for long. Anyway, the next part of the video is the bit where I'm going to add the metallic paint. So I'm going to use 2 shades of metallic paint. This is from Dixie Belle's Patina paint range. One is copper and one is bronze. You could probably get a very similar effect just using one of these colours, but because I'm staying true to the process of the vases that I created, I actually used both of these colours together and stippled them on. So I've put them on some paper plates behind so that I don't contaminate the colours in the jars, and I'm just going to use a combination of both of them. Again, I'm going to use a sponge and stipple it on the surface for a little bit of texture. Using both of these colours just gives you a little bit more dimension and variation to the tone of the piece, which is exactly what I wanted. This is a super pigmented metallic paint. It is meant to be used with the patina spray, but you can use it as a standalone metallic paint, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing today. It only took 1 coat to cover over the chalk mineral paint. So the cabinet has been dry overnight, and if I'm looking very orange, so the cabinet has been dry overnight. If I'm looking very orange, it's because I've got a heater directly at me. It was really cold last night, and it's cold in my workshop this morning, so I've put my little heater on, but it's making me look like an Oompa Loompa. Anyway, the next part of the process is the fun part. It's adding the turquoise. I'm going to use Lanny's Lagoon because this is the colour that I used on my vases, and I'm going to use exactly the same technique. The only difference is, with a vase, you kind of go with the shape of the vase, and it's quite easy to place the turquoise kind of on the vase. This is just a big old flat surface, so I'm going to start placing the turquoise on, but what I am also going to do is go back and get my metallic paints and maybe start dabbing those on as well, because some areas with the turquoise I might go too heavy, I might take it away. Just about playing around with placement and making sure that I'm happy with how it looks. I also used brown paper to apply the turquoise on the vases, so I'm going to use exactly the same stuff for that as well. This is just brown wrapping paper. I did use recycled packaging for the last time, doesn't really matter. I like this because it soaks up a little bit of the water, and that just gives you a really nice kind of textured effect, and it gives you really nice layers. I did use plastic as a trial on a very early vase, but I didn't like how much product that put on the surface. I preferred this, so I'm going to stick with paper. So what I meant when I said it absorbs some of the water is, I mean it absorbs some of the water content out of the paint. That's how much I'm going to start with. I was a little bit hesitant to add it on, and my only reason I'm hesitant is because it is such a large flat surface, and patina is something that needs to look organic, and this is definitely a process that kind of evolved, and I'm going to really speed it up because it took a while. The good thing about terra clay paint is, oh, and I also went rogue. I added some malachite. It's dark green. I know I said I was going to stick to the process and I was going to stick to the colours of the vases, but because it is such a large flat surface, I felt like it needed a little bit more dimension to that turquoise to break it up a little bit, because otherwise it would have just been a big old blob of turquoise. So I added a little bit of malachite, a little bit of green. I'm glad I did it. It added a little bit of depth to that turquoise, and then I just went back in with the Lanny's Lagoon, and the malachite was kind of touch dry at this stage, so it kind of blended in places, and all I'm doing is just pouncing that scrunched up paper on the surface to build up the layers of turquoise. And you know how I said I went rogue and added malachite? I also added some mermaid tail. There is a slight variation in colour, as you can see there. Mermaid tail is slightly darker, so I just felt like this was needed to add that dimension and those tonal variations. Otherwise, one colour of turquoise I just don't think would have looked as authentic. So I'm just adding a little bit of mermaid tail on. This isn't how it's going to finish up. I'm going to layer Lanny's Lagoon back over the top. So I just wanted to make a nice kind of rich kind of turquoise layered effect. And the main thing is I wanted this to look organic. That was what I was struggling with the most, is the placement of the turquoise versus the copper. I wanted there to be enough balance. So I went back in with a little bit of copper. And it was really a kind of experimental process of how to balance those two colours together and get them to work and try and make them look authentic. So I'm speeding it all up because, like I say, this was a process that went on over a couple of days. I added a little bit of turquoise back in. I added a little bit more copper back in. Herbie loved the copper, but he also loved the turquoise as well. So I went in a lot heavier with the turquoise on the top. I went in a little bit more with the turquoise on the cupboard doors. And then I started to add a little bit more of the copper around the edges, and this is when I felt like I was getting somewhere with it. I felt like it had a little bit of kind of structure and it was starting to look organic. So this is how it kind of finished up. When I'd added all the layers, I didn't really add anything else, doing anything else technique wise. I just kept adding those layers up and building them and taking them away and adding a bit more copper and adding a little bit more turquoise. And what I'm doing now is just adding some turquoise drips from those kind of grid bits on the doors, because I feel like if this was an authentic metal piece that had patinaed over time, I feel like that's where it would be kind of dripping from. So I'm just adding a little bit of mermaid tail and also a little bit of Lanny's Lagoon onto a small brush and just making it kind of drip with a little bit of water in my spray bottle, just spraying it on until it kind of dripped down the front, and I'm just going to leave that to completely dry. I also added some drips on the other grid parts as well, but I made sure that it wasn't symmetrical. Obviously it wouldn't have patinaed in a symmetrical fashion. I wanted this to kind of look organic, like I've said before, so I was just really conscious of making it look kind of as natural as I could. I left that to dry for overnight because obviously I introduced quite a lot of water for the drips, and then I just decided I needed to seal it because I could have kept going with that probably for another couple of days. You can play around with this look obviously as much as you want, and I think it really depends on personal preference where you want to place your turquoise versus your copper, whether you want a heavily kind of turquoise look or whether you wanted it more coppery and just add a hint of turquoise. And it would also depend on the shape of the piece that you're doing. So I just felt this looked right on this piece. Herbie loved it as well. So I used Terra Clay paint for the turquoise, so for that reason I'm going to use Terra Tuff to seal it with. And would any industrial project be complete without a little bit of black wax? I think not, and you know I love my waxes, so any excuse to bring those out. So I'm using Best Dang Wax in black here, and I'm just applying it liberally all over. I'm just applying it with a brush to make sure that it's got in all of the texture that I've created with the sponge and the paper. And you can see the difference here between the right hand side and the left hand side. The left hand side is much more vivid and bright, and the right hand side is much more grungy. Once the wax had sat on the surface for about 20 minutes to half an hour, you just need to take a lint-free cloth or a rag and buff it off. So you're going to buff the excess off, and that's just going to leave a little bit of wax on the surface, enough to give it some dimension and depth and grunginess. Now, I usually record an outro to this to say thank you for watching and subscribe to the channel, blah blah blah, but the builders were so noisy in the background with a big machine thing that I didn't get to do one. But as always, I have included a couple of close-ups. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different to my usual technique, and Herbie's very pleased with it. I think I pulled it off. Let me know what you think in the comments.